Malcolm X once said, "You can't separate peace from freedom because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom." The impact black people have made, not only in the US, but all around the world, throughout history is amazing. February, the second month of all 12 months, holds a significant meaning in our nation's history. Although first celebrated in 1926, ever since 1976, February became known as Black History Month. Black History Month is an annual celebration for us to recognize the central roles of black people in history. It's a way of remembering what the black people did to fight for their freedom and justice. On this episode of the Elkins Roundtable, we will be discussing Black History Month. Remember to subscribe and like for future videos. When it comes to African American culture for food, many would start to think of fried chicken or fried okra. During slavery, many African Americans created dishes that many of us enjoy and eat on a regular basis. The truth is, African Americans' culture for food offers many options, some even dated all the way back in the 18th century. Due to the hard times, many new cooking styles were created and many fruits and vegetables were incorporated into the dish. A great example is soul food, which is a popular cuisine shared around the country. Chickens, goat, beef, and fish were all important sources of nutrients when creating a dish back then. Black History Month is not only a time to recognize the famous and impactful African American figures in our nation's history, but also to celebrate black culture and empower black people today. Now that it's February, don't just lay in bed all day. Let's celebrate. Number 1, educate yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back because by watching this video, you're educating yourself. Way to go. If you want to take it a step further, here are a few things you can do this month. Visit museums that focus on Black history. Museums include the National Museum of African American History and Culture, or NMAAHC, which is a Smithsonian Institution museum located on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., in the United States. However, not everyone lives in the nation's capital city, so check out blackmuseums.org, a website backed up by AAAM, also known as the Association of African American Museums, which is a nonprofit member organization established to support African and African American focused museums, nationally and internationally, as well as the professionals who protect, preserve, and interpret African and African American art, history, and culture. Another way of educating yourself on Black history and culture is to read articles and books and watch videos and documentaries. Some famous books include The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis, which is about an African American family living during the Civil Rights Movement, and The Revisions, a novel by Margaret Wilkerson Sexton, which is about two African women connected by blood and similar circumstances but divided by nearly 100 years of history living in the 21st century. Other than educating yourself, supporting Black businesses and creators is also a great way of celebrating Black History Month. For more information, visit blackbusiness.com, a news site that empowers Black entrepreneurs and CEOs by promoting relevant news, success stories, and other valuable resources that stimulate entrepreneurship in African American communities. Throughout the 17th and 18th century, people were taking them from the continents of Africa. That was when the Americans decided to use them for slavery. The enslaved people were being held around the antebellum South, which constituted about 1/3 of the Southern population. The slaves also had to follow a system of restrictive codes, which means that they must know that they're property to their enslavers. Luckily, in 1864, the 18th Amendment was passed on by President Abraham Lincoln that abolished slavery in America. During the Civil Rights, a man by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. made a speech called "I Have a Dream," and that speech struck a chord towards the crowd with his words of encouragement. Along with that speech, It helped secure a passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. There was also a person named Malcolm X. He urged his fellow black Americans to protect themselves from the white aggression. He said, by all means necessary, a stance that often put him at odds with the non-violent teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. In 2013, 3 black organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created a black-centered political will and movement called Black Lives Matter. It was a movement in response of Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman. People in the organization mentioned that black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. Now you see, black history is not only about the history of what black people did back then. It's all about honoring the conquest and the struggles of African Americans. Black people have shown us that we are just like them in many ways. They introduced us to their food and music. You guys now know their history about slavery in America, civil rights movement, and how Black Lives Matter was created. We can even celebrate and educate ourselves by visiting places and reading books that were inspired by black people.